I would like
The respondents that came in. You'll see 5. They are not in ranking order. They were just listed. CarePoint was actually thrown out within about a week or so, week and a half, because there were material flaws in their proposal. They did not meet the requirements of it. They were issued a letter, so they were out. Now we had 4. These are the 4. Just wait a minute. One of the criteria that was used to determine as they submitted, like how they rate and how they do, was it's called the star rating, and you get that. It's Nursing Home Compare. It's on a website. Anyone can go in there and look at it. You type in a nursing home, and you'll see the latest surveys, inspections, and whatnot. This is used pretty much by everyone as an indicator of how well people do, although there are inherent flaws in just looking at that as the only reason to use a nursing home or not. There are things like someone may have just taken over a nursing home, and they inherit, if it was a bad survey, they inherit that bad survey, and it takes an average of 3 years to improve it. So there are different things in there. It's apples and apples and apples and oranges. It really, but it's one of the things that everyone looks at. It's the first thing that someone will say, well, how do they compare? So you use that as a base indicator of how people are doing. But again, it is not the end all. There's other factors that are involved. What this does is each of those 4 finalists, semi-finalists rather, this is star ratings taken off that website in terms of how they fared. And again, as I mentioned a moment ago, that some of these, they have asterisks, as you'll see. Some of them inherited deficient facilities, and so they have to work to improve those going along. Is the total complement of staff at Runnells at this point, and it adds up to 396. This does not include those employees that went to Sodexo approximately 2 years ago when we did dietary and housekeeping. But this is current as about a week ago when we put it together, and it's just broken out by categories because it's one of the things that the proposers asked of us. Let me say that as part of the review process, and as we reviewed, there were questions that came back from the proposers. And during the course of that, we actually issued 14 addenda to that original proposal. All those questions and answers went on the website, and went to every one of the proposers. So every time they asked questions, we answered them and sent it back out again. So that was 15 times rather that we ended up again putting an addendum to the proposal that we initially submitted or solicited. One of the things, the reason why this is in here is because they were, when we looked at the proposals, people made certain assumptions, like costs would be reduced because a lot of people would retire. And in this particular slide, you'll see that may not have been the right assumption because out of the universe of 396, in terms of eligibility for 2014, only 52 people even meet the requirement. So we needed to show that if you're going to say there's a lot of savings and you're going to assume there's a lot of people that are eligible, that may not be the case, and it was not the case. We were all asked to see what the impact would be on the budget going forward. So what we did is we used the appraised value of the property. And so one of the things that the board wanted obviously was to say, you need to do an appraisal, you need to see what the property is worth. The appraisal came back, the property came back at $26 million.
Excuse me, Director, just a clarification. Yes. Not the property, but the property operated as a nursing home?
As a nursing home, right.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it was $26 million. So we took that was taken, and then all of those costs that we are going to bear as a result of closing that we needed to cover were inputted in, and there are things like, as I mentioned earlier, if you remember, the finance department looked at it. It was $13.5 million at the end of 2013 was the subsidy. The appraised value was $26 million, which you see on the side. And then there was, over the next 5 budget year, post-sale, the county would save over $56 million. That's at the bottom here. And putting the property back on the tax rolls, because obviously if it's bought by an owner, a private owner, it goes back on the tax rolls. Estimated $500,000 in new property taxes to the town and to the county. There are costs that we need to cover as a result of selling, and those things are, we have to cover unemployment benefits. This is an estimate based on experience. As an example, with Sodexo, approximately 1/3 of the people went on unemployment at the time, so we use that same. Again, it's not an exact science, but you have to project something, and that cost is here. Loss of reimbursement, indirect expenses, you have $703,000. Cost of paying for the Union County psych patients. We still have an obligation, if the psych unit is not ours, to pay for those patients that are Union County. Pay off of the county debt. There is still some outstanding debt. That's roughly around $6 million, which is a conservative estimate. And that's important because as that figure holds and gets drilled down a little bit more, that comes off immediately off the sale. You have to pay off the debt first. Cost of paying pension, there's a pension obligation for employees, so that's that figure, but that all comes out to that side, and that's the net benefit. The next slide basically runs this out for 5 years. So it's essentially what you saw previously, but now it's a 5-year breakdown, and if you add these figures up across, then they will add up to the net figure on the previous slide. So you'll see that there are costs that need to be covered this year. Some of them go away because the obligation ends, and at the end of 2018, you're looking at about a $10,738,000 benefit or savings to the county as a result of this. Last slide, recommendations, part of the evaluation process. Whatever the board does, if they proceed, whatever the decision is, if they proceed to go forward, recommend to proceed to contract with the highest ranked proposer. They have to begin a transition plan, seek state approval, and make every best effort to close somewhere in July of 2014. And that, Mr. Chairman, ends the report from the committee.